yes, the beard this other button here, is kind of hilarious because it was an accident to start. Because what I did was oh gosh, when was this? It was early October. Because I historically I've trimmed my beard once a week, right? And that's just what I've done. And I had a period where I think 2 Sundays in a row something happened, and I just didn't do it. And that's not uncommon. I've had that, every couple months I'll skip one, sometimes two trimmings, and it gets long, and then it gets scratchy, and then I don't want to deal with it, so then I shave it. Not shave it, I trim it. Well, that happened twice in a row in early October, and then the third time, I rarely let it go more than those 2 times. The third time, got my trimmer out, but it was dead. The battery on it needed charge. It's like, great. So I didn't do it then. I went to charge it. Was like, I'll do it tomorrow. Tomorrow, I realized I hadn't plugged it in all the way, so it still was dead. And then at that point, I realized that it wasn't itchy anymore. And I was like, if I leave it, I don't have to deal with itchy. But so I had this whole like, now what do I do? So I just kind of left it till the end of October. And then at that point I realized, I've never really just grown out my beard to see if I like having it long or not. I should try that. So I haven't trimmed it since early October, but since then, not many people have noticed because I've been brushing it under my chin to kind of let it grow. And then within the last 2 weeks, I've been trying to get it to go straight down the way I want it to go down. And that means that it looks like a massive beard whenever I do that. So I'm on a 3-month beard right now. That's where I'm at. So happy New Year. It's Beard Joe.
Nice. As Blake said, holy beard Batman.
Yeah, totally. I totally get it too. Yep, you're not wrong. Just I don't know. It just seemed like a good idea at the time. So here we are.
Nice.
So yes, decided to let the beard go. We'll see how long it goes. At the moment, I don't think I'm gonna trim it until sometime in March, but go the 6-month beard look. But that means it's gonna get kind of long, legit long. So we'll see. It might be a really bad idea. I know that it's awesome when it's cold outside. I've decided that.
All right.
Super fun and exciting. So thanks for letting us start a little bit early.
Yeah, sorry for being a little bit late after saying, we could start early.
Sorry. Give me an excuse to cruise some stuff I haven't, I've been using the Safari reading list to save articles, which is kind of an experiment on my part. Lots of experiments and such. And I was just cruising to catch up on that. That's what I do. So thanks for letting me catch up.
Yeah. So I can't talk about this in the show because I don't have it yet. But I have one of these on the way.
One of these. I assume this is going in the chat.
Put it in the Zoom chat first.
That's over there. I can't get there.
Fine, I'll send it via messages.
Okay.
I don't want this to be public just yet. I want everyone to see your reaction first.
Okay. All right.
It's thinking.
It is thinking.
There it goes. Delivered quietly.
Okay. Oh dear.
Oh dear. I'm not getting the keyboard.
You're not. Okay. All right. So
you know what this is?
This is. Hold on. I have thoughts, but I just am not ready to share them quite yet because I want to read a couple of things here quick. So this is
Blake. I want that pen so bad.
Sailor Pro Gear Slim Northern Lights Purple.
Northern Lights.
Ooh.
Nice. Have you seen that one?
I've not seen it. It sounds amazing though.
It's like
Six.
sparkly purple.
All right, 6.7 millimeters thin. You can already catch on to like some of the terminology.
It's kind of like an iPad.
Yeah, so it's an e-ink iPad, basically.
Yep. I'll send this to everybody. It is the
Yep.
Books Tab Ultra.
So this is something you have on the way. Do I want to know how much this thing is?
Maybe.
Are they sending this to you, or is this something that you're buying?
No, this is something that I have bought.
Okay.
I guess theoretically I could return it, but I have no plans to do so.
Yeah.
Um, this is going to become my reading slash journaling device. This is what I'm going to use at night for my journaling workflow because it's a Android tablet basically. So Obsidian will work on it. And it's e-ink. So all of my RSS stuff is going to end up here along with I started reading the Wall Street Journal.
Nice.
I have the paper coming in the mornings, but if I don't get to it, I just had to have access to the rest of it. That'll be on here, and then the Harvard Business Review as well. It's a plan. But if I wanted to, I could also do task management on here because I used to do this now. I had this realization that I could totally just go Android and it wouldn't disrupt my workflow at all.
Okay.
I was a little bit sad when I realized that, but
Okay.
well,
All right. I don't think I agree with that last little bit there, but I could see where the appeal of this is there, this particular device. I could see that. Absolutely could.
I guess the other thing that this will be doing is serving the place of the Remarkable that I have been using for
Right.
like the
I would
in-person notes.
assume, yeah.
That's the primary reason for this thing, I guess. But the Remarkable, I'm sick of waiting for it to be able to send stuff to Obsidian.
So that's ultimately what you're saying is this particular device is the note taker dream that can come in and out of Obsidian, right? So that's ultimately what we're talking about. But it's e-ink, so it takes all the color stuff away, which means that it doesn't have all the distraction pieces with it. So basically, if I'm following the logic here, this is a I don't know what I want to say inexpensive. This is a tax of sorts to get away from distractions, if you will. Like that's
kinda
maybe in there, that territory.
Sure.
Hey, if some people are totally fine throwing money at a problem, there are some problems I will gladly throw lots of money at. I will gladly do that. I just don't see myself spending that kind of money on a device that I can use for note taking. I would much rather throw it on a piece of paper and transfer it later.
That is fair. That is fair.
That's my preference. But I think based on what I know of your method of using Obsidian, I absolutely could see this being a gold mine for you. Like I could see this being absolutely the correct call in your part.
So time will tell. Yeah, it's supposed to arrive on Wednesday. I guess the other thing I should say is that so when you get these books devices, I was originally looking at the Note Air 2 Plus, but that's like the older one. And yeah, this is supposed to be the new hotness. Just came out and it was like $100 more if you got the new one. But then you couldn't get the new one there's two places you can buy them. One is in Europe, and the other warehouse they have is in California, I think.
Okay.
So the US one had no devices and international shipping was going to be ridiculous. And then I stumbled across the clearance section and they had an open box basically with all of the extra stuff.
Okay.
So the case, the replacement, stylus things, what is else in there? A tote bag, a stylus case. Like there's a whole bunch of things that come with it. And it ended up being less than the price of just the device itself, literally anywhere else that had them in stock, which was just list price minus all the extra stuff.
Okay.
So I found one basically at a discount with all the extra stuff and pulled the trigger. And it should
Nice.
arrive on Wednesday.
Nice. Super fun. New tech. Always a good time. Blake asked for a nib grinding recommendation. Like, can I just say Mark
Oh
Bacchus
yeah, for sure.
is the place to go? Like, nib
Bookworm
grinding.
listener.
Yep, exactly. And my preference, like he's sent me, what did he send me? Two, I think I've got 3 pens from him. I think you've got probably quite a few from him at this point. The one that I like is this architect grind. That's my preference.
Yes.
That's my preference on it. What's yours though?
I have a architect grind, but then you can flip it over and use it as an extra fine. I forget what that's called.
Yep.
But he makes one called a blade grind, and I have a Pilot Custom 74 which is a medium nib, and I want to get that ground down to a blade at some point. I just have not sent it to him yet, but can absolutely endorse Mark Bacchus.
Yes.
Bacchus.
I think it's Bacchus.
Yeah.
Nibgrinder.com.
Quality
That's the
of
part you
work
need to know.
is amazing. Yep.
Cool. What else, Mike?
We should probably record a podcast.
Oh yeah, that's right. That's why we're here. Okay. It's your book, dude.
It is my book. That is correct. Ready to push buttons?
I am.
All right. Let's count it down. 3, 2, 1. So, if you remember, I said I did not like reading the last book that we covered for Bookworm.
48 Laws of Power?
Yeah, but I am sad to report, Joe, that I did have a chance to put it into practice.
All right. And
it was helpful. I hate to admit it. It was helpful.
This is all right. So I've had at least 3 conversations about this book since we finished the recording and release of that episode. And in every case, the person I was talking to made the comment that I don't think he actually recommends you do all these things. Like, no, yeah. I am locked in on that is not his intent at all. But it's just how the world works, and whether you like it or not, this is what you got to deal with. And once you come to grips with that, and you start to like think through those laws, like, yep, this happens here, and this happens here, and here's how I can respond to that one. And oh yeah, I get what they're doing now. Okay, yep. All right, I get it. I can play that game. Like, this stuff starts to pop up all over the place.
Yep. So with the day job, we have had an office that we were paying for when it used to be a local company. Now it's a distributed team and almost everybody works remote. So we were trying to get out of a lease, and we not only brought in a new tenant, but basically like did everything. However, the guy who owns the building was not being super cooperative.
Sure.
So we had to employ some of the laws of power, specifically the one about doing what's unexpected, because the person who was negotiating the lease, I had just kind of talked to them. We just covered this book for Bookworm, and typically they want to get everything in writing and they want it resolved real quickly. And the owner was the one typically who was dragging his feet and being slow to respond. And then all of a sudden he comes back and he's like, okay, so here's the deal. Now get out right away. And I was like, don't respond right away.
Just let
we
him sit.
were shut down for the week between Christmas and New Year's anyways. So I was like, yeah, just don't even reply. Like, yeah, we're supposed to be out by January 1st, but he's the one that like we're in this bind. He knows that you've already told him like you're off this week. So let's just see what happens.
Yep.
And it ended fine. We are out. We're saving a bunch of money. So that was good resolution, but I was a little bit annoyed how practical this book became right after we read it.
Yep. This is not a book I feel like I want to follow the rules on, but when put in situations I don't want to be in, guess what?
Yep. Exactly.
I guess good for you, I think.
I guess.
Reservedly,
Sure.
congratulations.
Thanks. One other thing I want to mention here before we get into the follow-up I mentioned last time, but I am going to be joining the focus course January cohort. So if you hear this before January 9th, you can go to thefocuscourse.com and sign up if that is of interest to you. I'll be doing one of the workshops on PKM, personal knowledge management, not whatever Blake's going to put in the chat next.
The real question is, do you know anything about PKMs, Mike?
A little bit.
Okay.
I'm getting there.
All right. All right. This is why you teach it. That way you can learn it more, right? That's the whole
Yep.
point.
Exactly. Privately kicking myself. Oh,
Can
boy.
always count on Blake. Yes.
Yep. We do only have one follow-up item here, which was for you to bite your tongue. Did you do that?
I did this, and I had some weird results that I was not planning on at all. So
Okay.
this is just and it came from a series of the laws of power, which was basically don't share more information than required, which is kind of what you were talking about with the the situation with the office, right? Like, I don't need to say words right now. Let's just let it sit. And whenever I've had a couple of scenarios in the office and in family relationships and stuff where I just chose not to share more than I previously would have. And in two cases, I had a coworker and then a family member, each, these are completely different situations, come up to me and ask me if everything was okay. And then wanted to like make sure there wasn't something wrong. Like, huh, interesting. Like, well, in fact, there might be something wrong, but I don't know the whole story and I don't really feel like talking about it. And I don't think it's really going to help anything right now. So I just chose to be quiet and like, oh, so what do you think we should do? Like, so then it like opened up this whole situation where we had a chance to talk through the thing that I just chose not to talk about. And it's like, huh, I was not expecting that. Now, I'm sure there are some other things that have gone on because I'm not sharing as much in some scenarios. I'm not privy to that, obviously, because we stopped talking about things. But I was not expecting it to lead to, okay, I'm biting my tongue in this particular scenario because I don't want to, at this point I can tell it's not going to go anywhere, so it's not worth me expanding on it. And as a result of doing that, I ended up in a full, like, let's resolve this situation, and was not planning on that. But I'll take it in this case. It's worked out for the better, so was not expecting that at all, Mike. That was complete backwards from what I was expecting. I thought things would just die and we'd let it go, but nope, we're gonna confront this head on now because I didn't say something.
So is that successful?
Sure. Yep. I bit my tongue and then had to talk more because of it. So what do you do with that? I guess that's successful. I mean, overall, the situation is better as a result of it. So I guess I would say that's a success. But I definitely talked more than I would have had I not done this. So maybe? As far as like the thing goes.
Do you feel the tactic from the 48 Laws of Power created more power for you? Like, did it tilt the tables into your favor? by doing
That's
this?
a good question. So if I
You gain
walk
an
through,
advantage, I guess, would be another way to say it.
yeah, so because of the fact that I bit my tongue, did not share too much in the scenario, because of that, it put me in a position where they then came to me to ask my opinion on the situation and wondering what was going on. Which obviously, whenever someone's coming to you in that scenario, like it's on me, like I'm in control of that situation now, whichever direction it's going to go. So I guess in that case, you could say, yeah, it put the power and tilted it into my favor. And I would say that was a positive in this particular case because then it meant that I was able to choose the narrative that those situations could follow, which I don't know. Like in both of those cases, I don't think the confrontation would have happened at all were it not for that case. So yeah, I would say as far as like a power, I hate using the term power move because like I made a power
Exactly.
move, like, but that's ultimately what happened, and it did tip it in my favor. So I guess as far as the laws of power go, me biting my tongue in that scenario did exactly what it was supposed to do. Just
All right.
didn't think it would go that way.
Maybe it was the beard that was
It's
intimidating.
totally the beard. Absolutely the beard.
If you have no idea what we're talking about, you should join us for the live recording sometime
Yes,
because Joe has a phenomenal holiday beard going
I
on.
do have a holiday beard going on. I got a 3 month beard at the moment, and I suspect it's going to end up at a 6 month before we're done. So, yeah, Joe
Nice.
decided to beard it out.
All right. Well, should we talk about today's book?
If we don't, we have other issues.
All right. Well, we are talking today about the 21 Laws of Leadership, another laws book. Very different flavor, I would argue. This is a classic book by John Maxwell. Full title is The 21 Irrefutable Laws of Leadership. Subheading, Follow Them and People Will Follow You. And this was first published 25 years ago, I believe, because I have the 25th anniversary edition. And this was just released, I think, a handful of months ago. Now, you and I have both read this book before, but it has been a very long time, at least for me. When was the last time you went through this?
I went through this, it would have been about 8, 9 years ago. Is when I went through it.
Okay. Yeah, so that's probably about when I first read it. I This 25th anniversary edition has a lot of additions to it. I don't have the old version to compare it to, but I can tell you from the preface he talks about how he's expounded on some of these different laws, added more context, added more stories. There's quite a bit, especially in the last half of the book, it seemed, that dealt with these laws being applied during the pandemic. So I feel like this is not one of those old classic books that you have to translate. I feel like the updated version definitely speaks to the world that we find ourselves in. And it's kind of interesting to me, just generally speaking, before we get into the actual laws here, that a lot of the stuff that he was talking about with COVID-19, uh, the tone that he spoke about some of these things could come off a little bit like "I told you so" sort of a thing, but it doesn't read that way. It's not negative, controlling, uh, corrective in any way. It's really just trying to inspire people, I think, to strive for these leadership principles and get to a high level themselves so they can make a positive impact in the lives of the people that happen to be following them. Um, but it was interesting to me. A lot of the COVID stuff did not change these, but it just reinforced the importance of them. It's kind of like you don't recognize how important something is until you recognize that it's not there. And what we saw with with COVID was a lot of people I would say let's just call it a leadership vacuum. I'm thinking of stories that people told me of like their jobs going remote, and they're now in meetings for 8 hours a day because their higher ups need to make sure that they are communicating to the people below them, but then they still expect everyone to put in 8 hours of additional work every day. And the executives feel good because they had a chance to do their stuff, but everyone else who actually has to do the majority of the work doesn't have any time to do it, and they just leadership has no concept of, well, they're just home all the time. Why can't they just get this done, right? Completely ignoring many of these laws that we're going to get into. So I thought this was a really fun read, and having gone through it, it felt more timely and more applicable, I guess, than even the first time that I had read it. Did you feel the same?
Yeah, and I would say that's probably because, obviously life stages change things. And when I originally went through this, it was with a group of, I think it was 18 to 20 men that we walked through this as part of a class at our church. So getting that opportunity to go through it and deep dive each of the laws, like taking a law per week, was a very good experience. But at the same time, like I was a new dad at the time, did not have hardly anybody underneath of me as far as like I was not in a leadership position. Though going through this, like it's not required to have a leadership position. It's almost a non-topic, if you will. Like obviously if you're given a position of leadership, this applies even more, but it's definitely not necessary. But when I went through it the first time, it definitely showed me like, okay, well, here's ways that you can be a good leader of your household. That was definitely my mindset when I went through it then. Going through it now and seeing like the changes he put into the stories and the examples that go into each of these laws and rewording some of the like subtitles for each chapter, that all leads to a very different perspective to me right now, because obviously I'm obviously still a dad, but I've now got 4 different teams underneath of me, and that amounts to maybe 25, 30 people that are reporting to me, mostly under volunteer positions, which is its own thing that he talks about a little bit here. But like that is a very different perspective to view this book through, and I'm grateful for that, because now I've got a little bit of a different mindset whenever I'm considering each of these laws. So it kind of hits me a little bit harder now than what it did then because of that. But at the same time, I know like the changes that he's made to it, I didn't really pick up on what those were. That might just be a factor of it's been long enough that I don't have the other one forefront of mind. And I wish I had taken the two and compared them, because obviously I have the two, but I did not do that. So although the new, like you can tell which parts are new because of the, this happened after 1998. So obviously this was an added component to the book. So you can tell what parts those are, and it is good to see that. But I also don't feel like he put this in a pigeonholed time box where in 15 years it's going to be out of date. I don't really feel like that's true. So I think he's got it set up pretty well for future readers.
Agreed. If you had to pick somebody at the beginning here, who is this for? Do you have someone that fits that description? I ask that because I feel like the title, The Laws of Leadership, people can look at that maybe and think, oh, well, I'm not a C-level manager at an organization, so I don't need any of this stuff. But you just shared a whole bunch of personal application as it pertained to leading your family. And I think it's a lot broader than maybe people realize at first glance.
I think you're absolutely spot on with that, because I know, like for me, obviously in my position, I'm put in a leadership position. Like I have people that report to me. So that if you're in that scenario, this is an obvious book that fits. But I think what people don't always necessarily connect is how even just leading yourself, like take a single person who just moved to a new country, you have no friends, your family is not anywhere near you, and your work is something where it's just you. Sure, right? Something in that scenario. Even then, like this does apply because this does still like so much of this like it's about character building and it's
Mhm.
about like life building, if you will. It's not necessarily going to require other people to learn these skills. And if you have any interest in becoming a person of influence of any kind, even over yourself and your friends, then this is going to be helpful. So that you're probably right. Like the connotation here is there's an obvious like positioning, like this is my job connotation with just the title of the book. That probably does it a disservice. It's going to be a lot wider. It's going to have a much broader impact than what it is perceived to have. That would be my take on it.
Yeah, agreed. Last question before we get into the contents of the book. How do you feel about this title, The 21 Irrefutable Laws of Leadership?
Pretty bold claim. I know he put that on the original too, and it's a tall claim. Obviously, he's got a lot more experience in the leadership realm than I do. So I would have a very hard time arguing with John Maxwell. At the same time, like I don't know what I would add or subtract from this. So maybe I don't have enough experience to say yes or no. That's the
Yeah.
problem. It's like, but it is a pretty tall claim. But how many books do we read that have pretty tall claims? Like the number one book for XYZ. Like, no, there's two others that are better than this one.
Yeah, you just typically don't think of John Maxwell as being the clickbait guy.
Correct. Yeah, right.
All right, let's get into the contents here. So there are, as the title says, 21 different laws. There's also an introduction and a conclusion. So that's 23 different chapters, essentially. We're not going to cover all of those because this would be a very long podcast. We're going to cover the introduction, we're going to cover the conclusion, and we're going to cover a sampling of laws in between. But I want to start here with the introduction. And this is pretty short, but I feel like there's a couple important concepts that we have to discuss in this introduction before we get into the rest of the material here. One is that nobody does all 21 of these laws well. He admits that even he does not do all of these all of the time. And he shared some specifics. I didn't jot down any notes about which ones he specifically struggles with. But I think that is very freeing right at the beginning. I mean, the way this is positioned, the 21 irrefutable laws, he's obviously done the research, right? He's the expert. And he's basically saying that even I have not mastered this stuff. So you don't have to worry about it either. And that's maybe making it a little bit too, what's the word I'm looking for? Taking a little bit too much from it because these are very important principles and they do, I believe, significantly impact the quality of the life that you have. I believe that where you are today is because of the decisions that you made previously, seed time and harvest, all that kind of stuff. So if you want to change your future, you got to change what you're doing today. And then those decisions and those actions will change your future. It's not just about, like you were saying, it's not just about people that work underneath you at a corporation or an organization. If you have any interest in personal development or personal growth, then you have to be able to lead yourself. He actually talks a little bit about that in here, but I do think it's freeing to know that you're never going to be able to just master this material. Everyone is in the same boat, essentially. Everyone is striving to become better, but we're looking for progress, not perfection. It's also interesting how he says that all these laws stand alone, so you can pick any one of them, which is what we're going to do for the podcast here, and talk about that. And yes, there are interdependencies between these, and they do influence each other. And there's a lot of places where he says, as I talked about in this other chapter, However, each one of these, if you wanted to just take one at a time, like you did with your group back in the day, and just study that one, that is totally applicable. And if you did that, you would definitely see some benefit from that approach. And then he talks about how the laws are timeless, they're the foundation of leadership, and they carry consequences with them. Uh-oh. So that means that you can apply this or ignore it at your own peril. And I think of all the books that we have read, this is the one where it is the strongest argument for just do these things and your life will improve out of any book that I've ever seen.
Yep.
And like I mentioned, you don't really expect like the standard productivity clickbait type stuff from John Maxwell, which to me is just evidence of the fact that he's lived this stuff out for so long. I don't know how old he is at this point, but he talks about a lot of different things that are different portions of his journey and his story in this book. And I, reflecting on it now, I think that's the reason, is that he isn't just saying this stuff because he knows this is what people want to hear or this is what's going to sell. This is the stuff that he's applied himself for a very long time. And so he's earned the benefit of the doubt when it comes to that, at least in my mind.
Yeah, he's in his early mid 70s at this point.
Okay.
So he's seen a lot from a leadership stance. But there's a couple things here in this introduction that I think you've touched on that are probably more important than we want to give him credit for. In that, not everyone does all of these well. We are human, like you were saying. To me, that's a pretty big deal, because there are definitely some of these that, and if we were to jump ahead to action items, we could probably pinpoint which of these ones that you and I struggle with, because I'm betting our action items follow suit on that. And yet, there are some of these that I know you can learn and you can get better at, but you and I each probably have our own. I know I've got a few that's like, I don't even have to think about this one. I just do this without thought. Like, it just happens. I'm not even aware that I'm doing it. Like, there are some of these for probably everyone. There's probably at least one, if not multiple, where you've kind of got these to where, yeah, this is pretty easy. I don't even have to worry about this one. But then there's going to be others like, holy cow, why is this in here? I don't ever want to touch this. Like, there are definitely those as well. So it's one where it's good to know that even the leadership guru, John Maxwell, has the laws that he himself struggles with. So that's a little bit freeing in that sense. But it's also, I think, important to know that each of these laws have a consequence, like you were saying. It's one that we don't like to talk about, right? If you do these things, it pretty much always, if done well, has a positive outcome. But if you don't follow this, it can have very negative ramifications. Now, the severity of that, quote, negative consequences is going to vary widely depending on what scale we're talking about. If you fail to follow through on a communication piece and we're talking about an international crisis, then that's a pretty big deal. If I fail to communicate, if I'm going to be home at 2 or 2:30, the ramifications of that are fairly minor unless there's some big thing going on tonight, right? So it's very different depending on what we're talking about. But regardless, there are consequences to actions, whether we like them or not. That's just how it goes. And that's ultimately what he's getting at here is like, if you follow them, you have this consequence. If you don't, you have that. Welcome to life. That's just how it is.
Yep. Should we get into the actual laws?
Sure.
All right. So the first one here is actually the one that I want to start with. So chapter 1, or law number 1, the law of the lid. And this basically in a nutshell is that how well you lead determines your effectiveness with others and the potential of your team. And the best way to visualize this is using one of these these graphs. And on the y-axis, you have the leadership ability. And then on the right axis, you have the success dedication, he calls it. And what the law of the lid basically says is that if you don't develop your leadership ability, you have a cap on how effective or successful you can be. And there's a really great visual in the book of the effectiveness here. So the success dedication, this is looks like an 8, but the leadership ability is only a 1. And then the box that is created by that that plotting that on the graph shows your effectiveness. And when I first saw that, it's like, wow. So if you're dedicated to the outcome that you want and you increased your ability even a little bit from 1 to a 2, essentially, you've doubled your effectiveness. And I think that's kind of the effect that he's going for there. And I think this is really powerful. Maybe hard to see in your own life, but I mean, we're both involved with our churches, right? There's the emphasis on discipleship. And if you're going to help people, you need to increase your ability in order to help them to develop their own ability. If you don't work on yourself, then ultimately you have nothing that you can contribute to somebody else. And if you try to do it, you will very quickly realize that. I think anyone who has tried to help somebody out or lead somebody without having the leadership chops to really do it effectively has maybe not recognized the amount of the damage that they've done, but at the very least, the person that you're trying to lead just disconnects and is like, yeah, I there's nothing for me here. He kind of talks about that later on in some different laws, but essentially your leadership ability is always the lid on both your individual personal and also the organizational success. So the quickest way to change your situation, I think, is to realize this and to work on developing yourself. Work harder on yourself than you do on your job, as Jim Rohn puts it. But by doing so, what that's going to do is translate into success for your job and for everybody that you work with.
This is a very powerful graphic. I think you alluded to that, but I think of it in terms of volume. So for the people who see volume, like with this chart, like if you're a number 1 on leadership and your dedication to your mission is at an 8, think of that as like 8 cubic units, if you will, of effectiveness. But if you elevate yourself to a level 8 leader and your success dedication is still at an 8, that's now 64 effectiveness cubic unit thingies that I've now made up. So thinking about it as far as like that volume, and again, when you see it, like, oh, buddy. Okay, so if I'm a poor leader, it doesn't matter how dedicated I am to our goal. Like it can massively increase our ability to be successful if I become a better leader. And that's what he's referring to as far as the lid. Like that's the cap, that's the top that you can't break unless your leadership ability increases. And I have to say, like, starting off with this is a really good way to start this book, because whenever I saw the graph and I saw that, like, this is the cap, it's like, so I need to go to work on myself. If I want my teams to operate at a higher level of quality, then I need to increase me, not work on them. Like that, it starts with me. And I have to be honest, Mike, that's frustrating.
Yeah.
I don't want to hear that. That is the opposite of what I wanted to hear. And it's exactly why he needs to start with it. So, okay. Yes. I'll go to work.
Right. There's another book by John Maxwell that I had read a while back called The 5 Levels of Leadership. He mentions it briefly in this one, but not real in depth. But the big takeaway from that one is that the further you go up in terms of the levels of leadership, the less rights you have, the less it's about you, the more it's about the people that you're you're leading. So you have to very quickly disconnect from the things that you are owed if you're going to be a good leader. But the story that goes along with this does a really good job of communicating the potential when you're able to go beyond that lid. All of the different chapters and laws that he uses in this book all have cool stories that go along with them. And the one in this first chapter is on McDonald's, which was founded by the brothers Dick and Maurice, but they had limited leadership. And so in 1954, they met Ray Kroc, who was a milkshake machine salesman with a big vision. And he knew that he could help catapult this thing, right? So in 1955, Ray partnered with these brothers and they started selling their franchises. And then in 1961, he bought the exclusive rights for $2.7 million, which sounds like a lot of money. Back in 1961, probably was. However, now there's 38,000 plus restaurants, which are valued at $170 billion. So Ray Kroc was the one who had the leadership ability to maximize the potential of this idea. And that immediately gets me thinking about all of my failed projects. Was it a bad idea or was it just I wasn't good enough?
Uh-huh. Yeah.
Right. Which reminds me of another thing Jim Rohn mentions is don't wish it was easier, wish you were better. Like if something is got a bunch of potential, then the if it was easy, everybody would do it essentially, right? So if something has a bunch of potential, it's by definition not going to be simple or easy. Otherwise, someone else would just step in and capitalize on the thing. So the fact that it's hard, like that should inspire us if we're all trying to make the most of our abilities and our talents to become more than we are currently so that we can take advantage of those opportunities that are in front of us. I don't know. I don't think any of my ideas have been $170 billion ideas, but maybe.
That is a frustrating realization, though. If you think about past projects that you've led that were shuttered, like I have a string of these, and you think about why did it not succeed, and then ask the question, what did I do wrong? Like even if it was outside of your control, what did I do that led to that failing? This is one of those exercises that people tell you to do that I don't ever want to do, and I tend to avoid as much as I possibly can. And I'm not ashamed to say that. It's just how I don't want to do that. Nobody wants to do that. But if you will, humor yourself and indulge in the difficult work and put yourself through the discipline to make that process happen, it seems like there's rarely a scenario where you are not at some level at fault or responsible at a minimum for that failure, especially if you were the leader, which then brings the question to how could you, like, if you were to start over and do that now, what would that mean? Like, what would you do different? How would you lead that different? What are the skills that you've learned that you would capitalize on? And then what are your remaining shortcomings? That's the one I don't want to know. But the things like the ones I'm still not good at that I need to get better at, and now I need to do the work to get better at those. And that's the area where the improvement can come in. But none of that's a fun process, at least
No.
for most people. There are probably people out there who really love that process, and I don't want to be in the same room with you, to be completely honest.
Well, let's get into the next law here because I feel like there's a tangential connection here. The people who are really motivated to work on themselves typically have a specific direction that they want to develop. The next law, however, is the law of influence. And you may think, well, I really want to make the most of my development. However, I don't care what anybody else thinks, and I don't really want to influence people because that sounds like the 48 laws of power.
Yes.
Right. But I don't think you can disconnect these ideas. The true meaning of leadership is influence, he talks about in this chapter. If you do not have influence, you'll never be able to lead people. I think that even applies personally. If you don't have influence, you can't lead yourself. What do you mean you don't have influence over yourself? Well, let's just say you write a task list every day and you've got 20 things on it and you only get 5 done. After a while, you just don't have faith in yourself when you make that list that you're going to be able to follow through and do the things that you said you were going to do. Right. And then your motivation is gone and it's a downward spiral. So I do think at the heart of it, you do need to be able to have influence. Now, there are in this chapter, he talks about the 5 myths of leadership, and then I want to get into like the volunteer organization stuff. This is the chapter that came from, and you kind of mentioned this earlier. So, 5 myths about leadership. The management myth: leading and management are the same. They are not. Leading is very different than management. Is kind of like the picture I get is micromanaging, making sure that someone follows through and does something exactly the way that you told them to do it. Leadership is entrusting them to go make the thing happen. The entrepreneur myth: all entrepreneurs are leaders. Nope. A lot of entrepreneurs, I would argue, are not. They can discipline themselves, but they have a real hard time rallying people behind their cause. The knowledge myth: neither IQ nor education determines leadership or equals leadership. The pioneer myth: anyone out in front of a crowd is a leader. I guess this one, it's possible to be you could be a pioneer and you could be a leader. However, I think you could just accidentally be in the right place at the right time, have no leadership ability, and very quickly people are going to go and follow somebody else. And my pastor has this saying that if you, actually he probably picked up from someone like John Maxwell, but if you are a leader and you turn around, no one's following you, you're just out for a walk. Right. And then position myth: leadership is not based on title. This gets into the 5 levels. The title is the absolute lowest level. That may work in the very short term, but it's not going to work in the long term. So ultimately, you have to have this influence. It is not an option. And in volunteer organizations where you have no leverage, how are you going to do that?
Very carefully.
Right? Because you can't tell somebody, hey, do what I tell you to do or you're fired.
Right. Yes.
They're not there for the paycheck anyways. They'll just leave.
Yes. Like, why would I do that? Blake had a comment in the chat. We're mentioning Blake a lot today, but leading volunteers is like training dolphins. If they don't like what you're doing, they'll just swim away. Like that's a great way to think of it. Like I will never. I'm gonna tell my volunteers that it's like, you guys are dolphins. Like, you guys they'll love that. But this is absolutely true in volunteer organizations. Like, take the teams that I'm over. Like, there's only one paid staff member. The rest are all volunteers. So it has to be done with sensitivity to making it easy for them, making it something that's fun for them. And I don't claim to be good at that. I know that it's something that I've continued to work on. Honestly, going through this book, I'm realizing how many shortcomings I have in that area. But it's something that I know I need to continually work on. But it's absolutely true. Like, if I'm working with a group of volunteers, like, they need me to be the one that's got the mantra that we're going to, preach every single time. And they need to make sure that I'm bought in and that I'm doing my part and that I'm putting them first and leading the charge, like all these things. Like, that's something that has to happen. And if I'm not willing to do something, why on earth would I ever expect them to do it? And it's something that happens in, paid scenarios where, you've got a C-level person who's got the authority and can push things down on their salaried or hourly people. They have a little bit of sway because they can control your income. But if you can't control their income, that whole incentive process is out the window, and then relationship becomes the number one component in that mix. Maybe there's more than relationship, but that's a very big part of it. And trying to make sure the influence is something that you maintain and can continue to build and then used wisely, like that's all something that is absolutely critical in a volunteer organization. So this is definitely something I need to continue to work on, but that's the world I live in for sure.
Yeah, and there's lots of ways that you can build that influence, obviously, and I would argue that the rest of the book is basically how you can do that. He does have a list in here about how leadership is character. It's who you are, relationships, who you know, knowledge, what you know, intuition, what you feel, experience, where you've been, past success, what you've done, and ability, what you can do. I think that's a good encapsulation of all that kind of stuff. But it's not built quickly. It's built little by little, brick by brick. But I guess just at this point, law number 2, the law of influence, don't write this one off as like, well, I don't really care about that. You need to care about that.
Right.
If you care at all about leadership and personal development. The next one here that I want to talk about is law number 5, the law of addition. And this is kind of the next step I feel. Siri's going off on my watch. Sorry about that. I'm going to restate that for Toby. Next one I want to talk about here is chapter 5, the law of addition. I feel like this one follows up on the law of influence because you have to add before you withdraw. This kind of reminds me of the 7 Habits of Highly Effective People back when we did that one. Stephen Covey talked about the relational bank account. I'm not sure if you remember that story, but basically you have to make withdrawals before you make a deposit. Or sorry, make deposits before you make withdrawals.
Say, I'm not sure banks work that way. It would be awesome if they did, and they kind of do in some ways, but usually interest is paid.
That's how credit cards work for most people. Yeah, so that idea really resonated with me, just the making the deposits. And that's how I view the law of addition here. You constantly have to be making deposits. You have to be investing in other people. Leaders add value by serving others, by putting their needs and desires ahead of their own. He also talks about in this section that the bottom line in leadership is how far you advance others, how much you are able to help people. So the big question that I wanted to consider here, I don't have an action item with this, but just the thing to kind of talk about in the podcast is like, are we making things better for the people who follow us? I feel like if you really are trying to maximize your personal development and you buy into the whole idea of leadership and you have a platform, even a small one like we have with Bookworm, although it's growing. So thank you everybody who's downloading and listening. But are we making things better for the people that follow us? I would like to say yes. And I think our intention is to do that. However, I think as a creator, we do have to be careful. We have a responsibility for the stuff that we create. We can't just mail it in because I don't know how you feel about this, but I personally feel if you're going to download an episode and you're going to listen to an hour and a half of us babbling about a book, there should be something that you could take away from this that's going to help you. Like I view that responsibility of the people who are going to invest that much time with us. They got to get something for that. And it's very easy, I feel, as a creator to go down the slippery slope of just creating the thing that is going to get the views or get the clicks. And this is the thing that I think rubs people wrong with stuff like the Part-Time YouTube Academy and the Ship 30 for 30. This isn't what they're saying, but this is the dark side of it. This is the 48 laws of power in the wrong hands, right? Is I'm going to manipulate people for my own nefarious purposes by leveraging these technology-based tools that way. And I think the people that I really enjoy following and are the people who are invested in giving something to their audience. They take that responsibility seriously. And so as I was reading this, I just felt Like I needed to take stock of the stuff that I make, and am I doing right by the people who read my stuff, listen to my stuff, watch my stuff. I think this is something that we is only going to be good if we take the time to consider it, but it may make creators specifically feel a little bit uncomfortable. I don't know. How do you feel about that? I feel like there's a weighty responsibility here anytime I put something out into the world. Am I crazy for thinking that way?
Well, there's a side of being a creator where you like there's a few different mindsets behind it, right? So there are some people who create because it's something on their mind and they just feel like they want to talk about it or make something around that idea. And then the public opinion of that really doesn't matter. Like they're not really interested in what people think of it. They just have this thought that they want to get out into the world. So there definitely is that particular side of it. There's the other side of it where, and I feel like this is maybe the area where I personally struggle with, just because of the time. But whenever you have something you've done for a long time, we've been doing Bookworm now for, what is this, 6.5 years, which seems like crazy numbers to me. But when you've been at it that long, sometimes what happens is, at least again, this is for me, it's easy to think through like, well, this is the book I want to read. So then I'm going to pick that and then we're going to talk about it. But my opinion on like the way that I'm presenting it and the things I want to bring up, I'm not necessarily doing that because I feel like it's something that would help our listeners. It's just because it's what's interesting to me. Now, there's definitely a place for that type of content, but at the same time, I think that when we've had our routines to the point where we're able to go through this book and pull out the points that you really need to know when you're going through this book. Like this is something that I've processed this. We've been through enough books. This is my perspective on it, and this is what the public needs to know about this. Like when you can have that viewpoint, like this is what I feel like you as a listener need to know about this book. If I'm able to get myself to that point where I can process it there, that's where this additive piece comes in. Like this is where I'm trying to add to the legacy. This is where I'm trying to add to you as a listener. And it's not necessarily about me anymore. Like, and that's a place where I struggle with it because it's easy for me to fall into the routine of, yeah, I read every day. That's easy. It's easy to connect with Mike and we'll talk about a book. That's simple. It's easy to put together an outline, figure out like, hey, this one's interesting to me. Like it's easy to do that, but trying to process it at a bigger level where it's like, here, this is the thing you need to know about this book. You need to watch out for this particular viewpoint. Keep your eye on this when you go through it. Like trying to get that out isn't always easy. And I feel like when you can find creators who are able to do that type of making, if you will, like that's the people that tend to really thrive. And like, yes, they can do like, this is my thoughts on this, but the reason I'm sharing my thoughts on this is because it would help you in this particular way, this XYZ arena. So I'm sure I'm missing something in that realm, but that's kind of how I process that.
No, I think you're on the right track there. Let's actually talk about the next one because again, this is related. I think the thing that makes it possible to be authentic and to do what we're supposed to do is that we need to make sure that we're connecting. So chapter 10 is the law of connection. One last thing from chapter 5 before we get in here is that when you give, you receive back more than you give, right? But I think that only happens when you do it the right way. 90% of people who take more than they give do it unintentionally, but 90% of those who give more than they take do so intentionally. So we want to be the people who give more than we take, and we have to do that intentionally. How do we do that? We try to connect. So the law of connection here, I think a lot of the application of this is kind of person to person in real life, but I was thinking about this in terms of all the stuff that we do online. I don't know. I've just been thinking a lot about over the last couple of weeks with the holiday break and everything. What do I want my newsletter schedule to look like? What do I want the YouTube video schedule to look like? What is the process for the different stages in writing? Where it starts off as maybe a thread on Twitter, and then if I recognize that this is something people care about, then I turn that into a newsletter, eventually a blog post, video script, whatever. Like there's different stages that this stuff can go down, but I can't just pick whatever I'm excited about in the moment and just make that stuff. Like you can't do it in a vacuum. So the point here, leaders touch a heart before they ask for a hand. That's hard to do in a podcast, right? The podcasts are great. I love them because that was the thing that gave me a seat at the table before I had any of these relationships. I would download podcasts and I would listen to people, and it felt like I was right there in the middle of the conversation. So I recognize now that there are people who have the same sort of effect when they download and they listen to my podcasts, whether it's Bookworm, Focused, whatever. So I don't want to just let that be. I want to continue to think about what are other ways for people to connect with me. Or let's flip this around. Let's not put the responsibility on somebody else, because he actually talks about in chapter 10, the law of connection, that it's the leader's job to connect, not the followers, right? So I can't just sit here and be like, well, I wish more people would reach out to me and let me know what they think. I can create vehicles and ways for that to happen, though. And that's kind of what I'm trying to do with the faith-based productivity community, is just make a place where I can connect with people. And I did a giveaway because I actually ended up with two copies of the laws of creativity, and gave one away to somebody who answered a question like, what's your biggest struggle with creativity inside of the community? I love stuff like that, where it's not just the cookie cutter stuff. It's not just the process stuff. It's the stuff that doesn't scale, right? And those are the things that people are always impressed by. It's like, wow, you did a video call and there were only like a handful of people there. Was that worth your time? Yes, it was worth my time because I gave more than I took right there. But every time that I do that, to his other point, like I get back a whole bunch more by doing that giveaway and surprising somebody with a copy of the book. I got a whole bunch of people telling me what their biggest struggles of creativity were. I've got like a year's worth of content ideas right there on like what people want me to talk about, right? If I ask, if I actually listen. And so like that's how leadership in the online space, I feel like that's kind of a unexplored isn't the right word. It's not something it's not the natural application of these concepts, though, and it's not something that I hear a whole lot of people talk about, especially creators, which kind of bugs me. It's all focused on the metrics and how do I grow the audience, and that always kind of feels like selfish. But I guess what I'm realizing, having gone through this book, is that it doesn't have to be. The more people that listen to my stuff, that watch my stuff, that read my stuff, the more opportunities I have to help them get to a place that they maybe could not have gotten to on their own, or at least make it the journey a little bit easier. I don't have it all figured out, but I've made some mistakes and learned some lessons. So maybe I can help other people avoid some of those same mistakes. And I really just want to continue to think about this. And this is one of my action items. It's very broad. Just connect with people. I want to find additional ways to connect with people. And it's broad on purpose because I feel like there's a million different ways that this could be applied. This is connecting with people in person at church and at the day job. This is connecting with people in the faith-based productivity community. It's connecting with people who listen to the podcast. It's the question that I want to continue to think on, and there's got to be additional ways and additional things that I haven't thought about, vehicles that I could use to connect with people, and I want to do a better job of that in 2023.
This is where I have two action items, and one of mine comes from this as well. And it's not really tied to online, but I get what you're saying as far as like, how do you connect in the online space? It's a very different realm. Like, how do we connect with Bookworm listeners. Like, there's really not real great ways to do that, but so I'm sure we could do some work there. But the way that I took this was with my volunteer teams, because, one of the ways that, I don't really struggle to get volunteers on our tech teams. And I think part of that is that I've actually got a waiting list right now that I say that. But part of that is that we actually have a decent amount of fun on Sunday mornings when we run things. And I try to make sure that that happens. Like, I'm the guy that comes in and is like, if you have a problem, I'm going to go solve it for you. And yet, if you don't have a problem, we're joking around and kidding. And it's like, guys, you screwed up the audio delay. Like, you can hear him talking before his mouth moves. Like, oh, like kind of a weird, combat movie, way back going on here. Like, this is kind of fun. It's like I'll make those jokes, and I'm not usually bent out of shape over something that went wrong technically. It's like, no, we'll get it better next time. Like, this is what do we need to do to improve that for next time? Like, I'm not going to berate people over that. That's kind of my view on it. It's like, let's have some fun while we're there. But one thing that I don't do is on a one-to-one level. I don't really connect with each of our volunteers personally, and that's something that I feel like I'm missing out on. Like, I can make this fun as a team, and we can joke and have fun and all the things, and that makes it a fun experience for everybody involved. But I don't necessarily know, what's going on in Steve's life that I could help him out with that's outside of this team, and maybe there's somebody else that I know on the team that could help him with something that's not connected to our tech roles. So, that's an area that I've kind of left untouched, and I think that's a huge miss on my part. So, reading this one, the tagline on this particular law is leaders touch a heart before they ask for a hand. That's a really good way to say that. It sounds like his teams underneath of him, underneath John Maxwell, are just sick of hearing this. It's okay, yeah, you say this a lot, but it makes a lot of sense, and it's something that I feel like I need to make sure that I'm better at. So I've got an action item down here to intentionally connect with every volunteer on Sundays. That is a very big task, actually. That is not a simple thing, because any given Sunday, that means I've got 5, 6, maybe almost 7 people that I'm trying to connect one-on-one with in some way, and I don't always have much time on Sundays to be able to do that. So it's a fair commitment on my part. Probably means I'm going to have to get here early in order to catch people. Probably means I'm going to have to stay a little bit late, but that's okay. That's my role. So I need to take that. So yes, I need to do that too, Mike.
All right. The next one here is the next chapter that I want to talk about. Chapter 11, the law of the inner circle. I'm kind of curious, as you mentioned that you want to connect with all of your volunteers. Do any of them fall into this definition of inner circle? And I guess I'll just kind of frame this. So those closest to you determine the level of your success. And there's a quote in here that I really like from Mother Teresa. You can do what I cannot do. I can do what you cannot do. Together we can do great things. So this is a little bit different application of leadership. I think this is looking for people that can hide your weaknesses. So this isn't directly from this book, but one of the big ideas around making the most of what you have to work with is to maximize your strengths. Don't try to develop your weaknesses. That's kind of the natural thing, though. We don't want to appear to have any weaknesses. So we'll tend to focus on, well, I'm going to do this thing. Well, really, we would just be better off doing the thing that we can do better than nobody else can do. So back to the original question here. Are you applying this law of the inner circle to any of the people that volunteer with you at church? Are there people there that you've specifically added to your team because they can do something that you can't do? Or are these all people who are, if we had an accountability chart, one level lower than you?
It's kind of a mix, I would say, but the vast majority of the people on these teams are doing a job that I can do and can do pretty well. That said, there's an entire team, our slide team. This is very basic, right? Sunday morning, somebody is controlling the words that go up on the screen, right? Somebody controls when to advance to the next set of slides. I am not the person you want to run that. Like, that sounds like a very simple, easy to do thing. Don't screw this up. I am the wrong person for that because I do one of two things. I either know the song well enough that I'm just going along with it and I don't realize I'm not advancing the slides. I'll do that. The other thing that I'll do is that I will look at the screen in front of me and not the projectors or the TVs that we're using. And on that screen, you can see all of the slides for the entire song, right? Which is what you want, because then you need to be able to jump between them if they happen to go somewhere you weren't ready for. But the problem is that my eyes will go to the next slide, but I won't hit the button to go, like, to advance it. Like, this is simple stuff. Like, this is like so easy, and I cannot do this. I cannot do that job. So I make sure that the people who run that setup for me know that they are doing something I cannot do. Like, I make sure that they know that. So that is an area where I know that they're filling a gap that I can't fill. I can get it done. It goes okay, but it's not as good as, say Al on our team. Like, I can't run it the way he does. So as far as like an inner circle, like, I feel like that's a little bit different than what we're talking about here. But
Yeah.
as far as like, these guys fill a role I can't do as well, but I also have, there's one other role, like with our video productions, like he knows more than I do on that. Like, he's better at that. So he's definitely in that inner circle of that. So there's maybe 2 or 3 people that would fit that title, if you will, for the inner circle for me in that very specific situation. I would say that there's probably at least 2 that fit that. And they definitely do make it possible for our overall teams to do a good job. And I could not make it happen without them.
Yeah, I think there's different applications of the inner circle concept. So I was thinking about your position at your church and my church. We've kind of separated the sound and the audio stuff. The sound people don't really know how to do anything the audio people do, and the audio people think maybe they know about sound, but they really don't. So that would be an example of, I have this knowledge gap, so I'm going to bring another person alongside and fill that knowledge gap. And you could do that in an organization. I guess technically you could do that in a family as well.
Right.
But so I don't have a specific framing for the inner circle in mind, but I do have an action item here. Essentially, when I think of inner circle, I think of the people that I'm going to let get close to me. When I say close, like my personal confidants. I don't know, like, this is not the law of connection at this point. This is the people who, let's just use the religious example of Jesus had his disciples, right? But then he had the 3 that came with him, and they prayed on the mountain. Like, that's his inner circle, right? So the people that I'm going to let into my inner circle, John Maxwell talks about how you should have a list of things that are requirements for the people who are going to be really, really close to you. And again, I don't have a specific arena for what I want to define as, this is what I'm saying when these people are my inner circle. But I guess if I had to pick one, it's really just a lot of the faith-based productivity stuff. This is my personal mission, right? This is kind of what I feel like I'm here to do, right? So the people who are going to be in my inner circle are going to be people who really resonate with that vision. They want to help me build that thing. And that's where I feel like there is potential, because I can't do all of the things, and I can't do all of the things well. There are other people who can do some of this stuff better than I can. But I do want to think about, what are the requirements for these people who are going to be in this inner circle. He talks about, John Maxwell, in this chapter, 3 areas people need to be solid in before you bring them into your inner circle, which is who they are, what they do, and then how they lessen your load. And I want to think about that, and I want to come up with a list. I'm not sure that this list is going to have any sort of application. Like, I don't think, having come up with this list, I'm going to use this as like, well, you got to meet all of these requirements. But really, the intended benefit I think that I will get from this is just defining those things, recognizing where I do need some help. And I feel once I have those things written down, I will be able to more easily see who are the people who can and want to help me in those different areas. Does that make sense?
It does. It does. Basically, you're documenting how to build your inner circle. That's what it sounds like.
Yes, yes. And I guess I'm a little bit weird because this is when I'm talking about my inner circle, it's really like my life purpose, my life mission, which is all around like helping people make the most of the time and the talent that they've got to work with, right? And there's lots of different flavors of that. And I don't have a specific organization that I want to say this is all going to happen under this umbrella. But that's kind of the perspective I'm going in with. Like, if your life theme, which is the term that I use, is not in alignment with mine, and that's like, I guess, who they are, and the skills and abilities that you have to bring to the table, what you do, if those don't have a way to lessen my load, then maybe you don't belong at the inner circle. That sounds harsh, right? But I think this is important. There can be people who you align with, people whose missions and purposes are very much in agreement with yours, but they have no ability or intention of being able to lessen your load, right? They can't add in a way that somebody in the inner circle should. I guess going back, I'm remembering the action item that I did of like where I ranked everybody in my life from like plus to minus.
Adders versus
Looking back on that,
subtractors.
like, yeah, the people who were the plus variety, those are the people that I would consider for my inner circle as I'm reflecting on this. But I also recognize that in that exercise, I never considered what sort of skills or abilities, like, why am I going to these people? Why do I feel like they are adding to my life? Right. I think there's value in identifying those things and maybe some partnership opportunities that will arise from that.
I commend you for being willing to document this, because that is not something I would do. Like so one of the laws, we don't even have it on the list, is around the law of intuition, being able to feel your way through situations. Like I've learned that my intuition level is very high. So like stuff like that, I just feel my way through it. Like I'm not one to just like, let me document this and figure out how this could go. Like, no, these three people, done. Like that, that's my view on it. But that's me. And I know that that is not normal. So that is not a common trait. So like the concept of trying to document this just makes my skin crawl. Like I don't want to do this at all. But it's absolutely something I think you should do. Like you are definitely the right person for that job.
So have you ever taken the Colby assessment?
No, I think you asked me that about every third episode, though.
You probably are a high quick start would be my guess. I'm a high fact finder, but I guess what I'm saying with this action item is I don't want to create a process out of this.
Sure.
I want to write down my thoughts, and in the process of doing that, I believe there will be clarity.
Yeah.
But I do not want to create something that is like an SOP for joining the inner
Sure.
circle.
Yeah. Yeah. You want to think on paper about it. Is that?
Yes.
Well, it
yes.
might not be on paper, but you get my point, right?
Yep. Exactly. Do you want to introduce the next one? I asked you before we recorded.
Yeah. So
there were a couple laws that stood out to you. So this was one that you mentioned.
Yeah. So the next one up here is Law 12, the Law of Empowerment. Only secure leaders give power to others. And this is one that, the corporate world doesn't really, in most corporate scenarios that I'm familiar with, this is like anti-operating procedure, in that like once you have power, like you hold on to it and you don't really hand it over to anybody. But this is one that, if you're willing to give power to other people, like they make you look even better, and it can go significantly better than you would expect it to. And I don't know that this is one that I've ever struggled with. It's just one that I know that I've done naturally. This is one of those, like, I don't even think about it. It's like, hey, you can do this. Even if you can do it only 80% as well as I do, like, I'm still going to give it to you. And then we can work on making you better at it. And that's a view that I've had for a very long time. And I do this in many scenarios. I've empowered a lot of people to take stuff that's on my plate that they want to take. Like, sure, absolutely. Let me hand this over. You can do this. You have full control over it. I will not going to get in your way. And that's a part of it that I think is easily forgotten. Like, people want to delegate something. They will hand that power over. We've heard this from how many places, like delegation. Like, this is something you should do. But once you have it delegated and you give somebody the power to do a task, like, get out of their way. Like, let them do the job. They've got a quote in here from Teddy Roosevelt. The best executive is the one who has sense enough to pick good men to do what he wants done, and the self-restraint enough to keep from meddling with them while they do it. Like, get out of the way. Like, let them do their job. And this is a part that I know, like, again, I don't really struggle with this, but it's something that I think is super important for leaders in general, because you are going to hand things off to people. You have to give people power to do things if you want to be anywhere near successful. He's got stories here where people wouldn't do that, and it gets to be painful and almost completely self-destructs if you don't. So being willing to give up that power is super important, and one that, like, once you do that, let them do their job. Like, it's okay. Let them have that power. It's all right.
Yeah, he talks in this chapter a couple barriers to empowering others, which I think these are pretty profound if you think about them. Desire for job security, resistance to change, or lack of self-worth. I think those are accurate, and it seems kind of simple. So when you read those and then you think about, well, why haven't I empowered others?
Right.
There's a disconnect somewhere there.
Yes.
Is it because I want job security, I'm resistant to change, or I don't have self-worth? Like, that's uncomfortable to ask yourself those questions, but I feel like that's John Maxwell in a nutshell. He does a really good job of challenging you that way. The other thing I really like about this chapter is how to empower others. There's 5 different steps here. I had heard of 4 of these different steps before. Maybe there were 5 in the previous version. I just forgot it. But I've heard people quote this stuff many different places, many different times. Step 1 is I do it. Step 2 is I do it and you're with me. Step 3 is you do it and I'm with you. Step 4 is you do it. And then that's kind of where, whenever this has been communicated to me, that's where people will leave it, because it's like, there, now you're able to do the thing. I can disconnect from it. I can go do something else. But that completely undermines the real motivation behind all of this leadership stuff. Because step 5 is you do it and someone else is with you. It's not, I'm just trying to clear things off of my plate so I don't have to do them anymore. It's, I'm helping you so that you can help somebody else, and we continue to pay this forward. And so something as simple as that last step completely changed that whole section for me and helped me see it in a way that I had not before.
And that's the part that is gold. Let's go back to this slides team, right? I do not train our slide team anymore. I used to, like, whenever I have somebody new come on, which doesn't happen very often anymore, but whenever somebody new comes on, I don't do that training, because there's a guy on the team that I taught how to do it using those first 4 steps. And then just based on timing, after about 6 months of him being in that role, someone else was coming on the team, and I asked him to do the training, because at that point he'd gotten to where he was at my level or higher as far as, like, how to do things in the program. And then he took over on the training. And now, because of that, it had this weird effect in that, because he taught the other person who was a peer how to do it, it, like, opened this door for them to work together on figuring out how to do things and how to make things happen. And they're doing things, like, I don't even understand what they're doing right now. Like, there's stuff that they're accomplishing very easily that I haven't gotten involved with, because, like, it's their territory. Now, I know enough about the program. I could go figure it out if I took the time, but I don't need to, because they teach each other how to do that stuff now. So I don't have to get involved with that. And it's because I gave them the power. Like, here you go. Make this do this thing. I could get it done, but you have the time and the expertise and you're interested in it. So let me know if you need help. I'll back you wholeheartedly. Tell me how it's going, and I'll check in once in a while. And that's the part I haven't been doing. But that is really cool to see when you've got somebody on your team that can do those trainings and can do the empowering of even more people. Like, it's kind of cool. I just sit back and watch, and this whole thing just kind of happens. Even though that technically it started with me, but like at this point, they've made it significantly better than I ever could have. So thanks, team, if you're listening. Appreciate you.
All right. Should we go on to the next one?
Yeah, so the next one here, I guess I'll intro this too. So Law 13, which is the law of the picture. And people do what people see. This one, like, people think of military stuff. Like, military is easy. Like, military comes up a lot in this book. But military is easy on this particular one because it's like, well, who leads the charge? Well, your commanding officer should lead the charge. Like, people just kind of intuitively know this at this point. But obviously not, that doesn't happen all the time. People don't always lead in that way. But if you're willing to set the example and show people what you want done, like, that is so much easier to follow than it is to like take what they're telling you and then make that happen. And, you know, one of the examples I would have just personally on this one is I've tried to, and not everybody does this, and I get it, I'm not making them do this, but I try to make sure that our teams, and especially the people who are going to be at the church all day on Sunday, like the entire morning, like when you pull up to the parking lot, you're getting here an hour before everybody else. Park as far away from the building as you're willing to park. Like, I do this all the time. I will park in the farthest spot away from the building because I know my car is going to sit there all morning, and I'm not back and forth. I'm fully capable of walking the entire length of the parking lot. It's slick this time of year. I'll take it. Like, that's fine. I'll do that. But I've got a couple other team members that do the same thing now. Like, they park next to my car, and one of them likes to try to park in my spot, which is the farthest away. So it's now become a thing. Who can park further away? I took the truck one day and parked on the snowbank. But it's like, okay, this is the thing. But the reason for that is because there are many people who are either elderly, they have kids, they should not be walking on ice. Like, they don't need to be walking the entire length of the parking lot. And if I can put 1, 2, maybe 3 cars as far away as we can, that means that someone else can park closer and they can have an easier walk into the building. Like, and that only happens because Joe's willing to walk a long distance to get to the building, because it's not a short trek from the bottom of the parking lot to the building. So, like, setting that example and showing people what you want to have happen, like, that makes it much easier to follow. And whenever I've got people who won't, like, my leadership that doesn't do that type of thing, it gets kind of hard to follow on that. So it's, you know, set the better example.
Yeah, that's one of the things that he mentions specifically in this chapter is the most valuable gift a leader can give is being a good example. So good job, Joe. He also says that the people you lead are always watching what you do. So what's that saying? More is caught than taught. That is absolutely true. And the law of the picture here, this has multiple applications. Yeah, it's the little things that you're talking about, which are in service of the big vision that you ultimately need to communicate. So another thing he talks about here is that leaders are stewards of the vision and that they understand that mission provides the purpose or the why, vision provides a picture or the what, and then strategy provides a plan or the how. And this is something I want to spend some time thinking about, because those are 3 different ways of describing what I would have previously stated as vision, right? So you can paint a picture of the vision, and that's just the what. That's not going to be enough for some people. And then ultimately it's the responsibility of the leader to make sure that people follow through and take action on this. So if they have the what, but they're not following through with it, why aren't they doing it? Maybe they don't know how. Maybe they don't know why, right? But ultimately, if I am going to take responsibility as the leader, it's up to me to fill in the gaps there. Uh, and that is another like key idea here, which I have been thinking about a lot lately, is that leaders can afford to be uncertain, but they cannot afford to be unclear. So that means that I may not know what the best thing to do is. That's okay. No one's going to hold that against me as a leader. However, if I do know what needs to be done and I have not communicated the why, what, and how, that is completely on me. And people will notice that and they will disconnect from me as a leader. They'll recognize a lack in leadership ability and they'll go find someone who has more. Right. So that's something I've been thinking about. I don't have a action item associated with that necessarily, but obviously it's been challenging me to step up my leadership and not just think that because I have communicated in a certain way something that it has really been communicated. I'm recognizing that I tend to look at things from one perspective and I need to consider something from all the different perspectives before I try to communicate it to the people who are following me, whether that's at church, home, or the day job, whatever it is. It's got to have more context. It's got to have another dimension to it before people can really attach to it and follow it.
Yeah, and you always have to set the example, right? Like there's a quote from, who is this? VJ Featherstone? I don't know this person. But the quote was, leaders tell but never teach until they practice what they preach. It's like, I like that.
I like that.
That's well said.
Yep. All right. The last law that we're going to talk about here before the conclusion is the last law in the book, Law 21, the Law of Legacy. Although there are lots of great laws that we could talk about here, lots of different things that I jotted down. But this one is interesting to me because he talks about the life theme. He doesn't call it a life theme. He says, what is your life sentence? And I was kind of curious, Joe, do you have a life sentence?
I don't know. I don't think so. That's the frustrating part. Whenever I was thinking through, it's like I don't know what that would be. Like I have like these little like short-term missions, like 3-5 years out. Like I can kind of work towards that. But as far as like a life sentence, I didn't really know what to put down. If you asked me to write that, I don't know what I would put down.
Yeah, well, this is not easy, and I think that it's also easy to discredit this and think like, well, I don't need to. I have a general idea. I don't need to put in all the effort and the work to actually go through this. I think there's a lot of value in this, however, and would advocate for everybody doing some form of this. My version of it, like I said, is a life theme, and my life theme personally is help people answer the question, why am I here? By inspiring, encouraging, and teaching them to connect to their calling, discover their destiny, and live the life that they were created for. And then everything that I do, personally, professionally, all the side projects, etc., I try to filter through that and make sure that it connects in some way. So I have noticed that maybe it doesn't affect the things that I would do, although I think it actually does. But let's just assume that it doesn't. And you go through the life theme exercises, which I've actually got like a 5-step thing that I give away for free inside the faith-based productivity community. So if people want to use my version of it, they can, but you don't have to. I would just encourage you to think about like, what is your life in a sentence? Like, what is your theme? We're recording this at the beginning of the year, so the yearly themes and the words for the year, like this is a common idea. Well, go bigger than that. If you were to encapsulate your entire existence in a single sentence, what is it? And it doesn't have to be that forever. It could just be that for this season. It could change. It could evolve. But I think, again, assuming that this does not at all influence what you are doing, it absolutely influences the way that you do it. I think it's a lot easier to bring motivation and excellence to everything that you do when you recognize why you're doing it. And again, you may have a general idea of why, but just my personality, I found a lot of clarity comes from actually writing it down and saying, oh, this is how it connects. Well, that makes this thing that I'm doing way more valuable now. And I think that as it pertains to leadership, people can see that, people can connect to that, people can tell when you're faking it too. Like the they maybe won't know why something doesn't seem authentic, but they'll be able to smell it. So I think this is a really cool way to end the whole book. And he gives a couple of examples of life sentences. And I would just ask people to think about this and to just consider the legacy that you're going to leave. He talks about the 3 different pictures of legacy, which is a clock, what are you doing? A compass, where are you going? And companions, who is going with you? There's developing your leadership legacy. But this is kind of like habit number 2, Stephen Covey, begin with the end in mind sort of stuff. So I don't think there's anything like super unique in here other than that life sentence. And once you see John Maxwell's next step, I think that is like, well, what does this mean for me? What does it mean for Mike Schmitz? What is his life sentence? And I'm not going to give you an action item here, but would be curious if people who do this sort of thing, what sort of results they get from the process. Everyone that I know that has done this sort of thing, it's like, yeah, this really helped. But then I don't know, I don't follow them around for years afterwards and see, like, are you actually filtering things through this? Like, does it really affect your day to day? I can absolutely report back for me, it does. And I think John Maxwell would say that it does. But I don't know. I want to see more social proof of this idea, I guess.
I would be curious to know what your process is that you would recommend to people. If you don't have this life sentence, you don't know what this is, what is that process that you would recommend people go through? Because, like, yeah, it's cool to say, sure, you should think about this. You should come up with what this is. Great. I'm a very tactical person when it comes to that. Like, that's a very vague task that you just threw out onto the world. Like, that's where I go. Like, I get that.
Okay.
But you're also not wrong in making it vague either, because it could potentially be very different, that process, for different people. Knowing that, like,
yeah.
Do you know what I'm saying? Like, it could be very different for different people depending on, like, the way that they think, their personality styles. Like, things can be very different in the way they come at that. But on a broad level, do you have, like, a more tactical, like, these are the 3 things I think you should do, like that type of thing?
Yeah. So the things that I've gone through here for my process, the first step is to recognize the moments of impact, the moments where you come alive, you feel energized, like something's more important to you than life itself, right? So identifying what are those moments of impact for you is step 1. Step 2 is starting to think about your ideal future. You know, what does that look like? And getting as specific as you can. What time do you get up? What are you doing during the day? What kind of impact do you have in the lives of others? Silly things like, how are you dressed? What kind of job do you have? What do you do for fun? Where do you live? Who's there with you? That kind of stuff. Then step 3 is to think bigger. So what would you do if you had unlimited resources? What would it look like if you were wildly successful? That sort of stuff. Kind of removing the limits of our thinking in terms of, like, what's realistic. Step 4 is identifying your core values. What do you want others to say about you? What are you passionate about? What do you love doing? Getting those, like, codified for who you are. And then you condense all of that stuff, all those visuals, into a single sentence, which I call a life theme. So that's the high level. And like I said, I've actually got a challenge for this in the faith-based productivity community. If you like that approach and you want a little bit more detail and some examples, I'll put a link in the show notes for people. But that's not the only way to do it, obviously. And I think the real value is just you walk away from reading a book like this thinking about it.
Yeah. Yeah.
Because if you start thinking about it, you'll probably see things, which is really the whole idea behind those different steps, is to get you to notice some of the stuff that has happened in your life that was really impactful, and helping you to recall that and ask why.
Well, thanks for that, because part of me asking that is very selfish, because apparently Bookworm is more about me than it is about the listener. I guess. I don't know. Definitely not. That is just me being obnoxious. The part of the reason I'm asking is, like, this is the time of year when people ask these questions, 1, and 2, like, me personally, I've been working through this for a couple months now. It's like, I'm on a pretty good track with what I do for work. I'm on a pretty good track with what I do personally. But why? Like, why is that? Why do I feel like I'm in a good spot? And what is that overall mission behind it? Like, I can tell you, like, on subscales what that means. Like, when it comes to the tech stuff I do at church, like, I can walk you through like some of our missions and what we're shooting for and why on that. But that's the tech department. That doesn't mean it's Joe. Like, those are two different arenas. And what I do and the way that I come at that can be very different than what we're doing as a tech department, because it would be much bigger than that. And that's okay, but what does that mean? Now, I'm saying that knowing, like, I'm collecting a bank of these questions, knowing that at some point in probably the next month and a half, I'm probably going to do a personal retreat of some sort. I know you've kind of preached this for years. I'm not putting this as an action item at this point because I'm not quite there. But at some point, I need to sit down, take a day or two, and just kind of work through all these questions. And it's going to be painful. It's going to be hard. And that's part of the point, right? And
Yep.
that's something I need to do, and I've not taken the time to do that. And I feel like that's a part that I'm missing right now, because it feels like, yeah, I can my day to day and my week to week, great, solid on that. But the next year, like, I kind of know that. You get me to 5 years, and I can make some guesses. 3 to 5 years, sure. 10 years out, no clue. Like, what? But that doesn't mean that, it's going to come true because you put together that 10-year. Like, I'm not that naive. But at the same time, like, I don't have that overarching drive behind it. Does that make sense?
Yes, it does. Yeah, I don't want to spend too much time talking about this, but that is where the exciting stuff happens, honestly, is the further out that you go.
Yeah.
Because 5 to 10 years, I mean, you could pick pretty much anything and you could completely change your life in 5 to 10 years. We vastly underestimate what we're capable of in the long term, and we overestimate what we're capable of in the short term. And that's really the value of having those 5 to 10 year goals. It's not really a goal. I mean, it's going to change, but it is a yard marker. It's a point in the horizon that you're aiming for. You don't have to have the blueprint. You just need the compass. You got to know, I'm going in this direction. And then you can fill in the blanks with the details as you go. So like the blueprint, that I love that analogy, because you're not going to sit down and start building a house unless you have the blueprints and you figured out all that stuff. But that is a terrible approach to project management for things that you want to do and by the end of your life.
Yep.
You just got to figure out what the next thing is, and then do the next thing, and then do the next thing. You take a step forward and then the next step becomes clear. Cool. We should probably go on to the conclusion here.
Okay.
There's not a whole lot in this other than another action item here for me, which is to take the leadership evaluation.
Yeah, same.
I noticed you have this one too.
Same. Yep. Ditto.
But there is a very cool summary here of different levels here, I think. And he uses the term organization, but I think you could apply this to team, whatever situation that looks like for you. So personnel determine the potential of an organization. Relationships determine the morale of an organization. Structure determines the size of the organization. Vision determines the direction of the organization. Leadership determines the success of the organization. So if you've got a team and you've got all that other stuff in place, really the thing that's going to make that team successful or not is going to be leadership. Going all the way back to the beginning, the law of the lid, it's not just you, it's everybody else that's connected to you. Whether they are above or below you, I would argue, on the chain of command or the accountability chart, we really have a moral responsibility, I feel, to maximize our leadership ability. Whether or not you come from the same religious background is irrelevant. If you are here on this earth and there is breath in your lungs and you care about personal development at all, you care about productivity at all, Chris Bailey, the author of a book that we're going to be covering shortly, spoiler alert, said that people are the reason for productivity. I really believe that. If you're just focusing on yourself, your vision is too small. Your impact is going to be minimal, and you're not going to have any sort of legacy that you are going to leave. What a miserable existence. At least for me, like that's not going to do it for me. I want to know that I'm making a difference. And yeah, 4,000 weeks, like cosmic insignificance theory, like we're not going to be able to change the entire world, but we're going to be able to change somebody's world. And that's what leadership is all about. That's what productivity is all about. That's what creativity is all about. It's about releasing the gifts that are inside of you, and in doing so you help somebody else, but you also help yourself. You get to a level that you could not have otherwise. And then the people that you are trying to help, it's almost like they're just along for the ride. Like the real benefit is what it does inside of you.
I feel like that's really hard to add to. Like there's this particular conclusion. It's not even 2 pages. It's like a page and a quarter, and yet in that page and a quarter, he's got this summarization of like you need to be developing leadership skills. It does not matter if you are the leader of an organization or your family or even just yourself. There's a lot of character building here, and forget all the, influence side of it. Like that's a very important part of it, right? But the skills and the character traits that you are going to build in developing the skills behind these laws are worth it just in themselves, I would say. And he kind of sums that all up here in the conclusion very succinctly and shows like here, this is why you need to work on becoming a better leader. And yes, if you live in a hole somewhere, it doesn't it doesn't go anywhere, but very few people actually are that way. There are people around us, and we have relationships, and we are connecting with other people somehow. The question is how well, and are you working towards this mission in your life to leave this legacy, and are you following all these laws that can help you do that? Like that's ultimately what he's getting at. And the level at which you're going to have success and effectiveness is based on your leadership ability. So that's what you need to be working on.
Absolutely. Should we go to action items?
Sure.
All right. So I have 3 action items. The very broad connect with people action item. Come up with a list of things that people in my inner circle must have. And then the third one is to take the leadership evaluation. I feel like the majority of the things that are in this book are not specific, like I'm going to apply this one in this specific situation. There's no quick fixes here, which was a little bit surprising. I feel like you go through all these different laws, each one can stand alone. I went into it thinking I was going to have a ton of action items. It gave me a lot to chew on, a lot to think about, and a lot to process. And there will probably be additional action items that will follow up from that. However, these are the 3 that were immediately visible to me after reading this book. How about you?
Yeah, I've got a couple here. One's the same, taking the leadership evaluation test. The other one was intentionally connect with the volunteers on Sunday, which I talked about to some degree. But you're absolutely right. There's a lot of stuff here that if you have a specific area that you're aware of, like you could easily think of stuff that you need to do and then action items that you could take, which is what we did with the law of connection. But there's so much that you could do that at some point it's just like you shouldn't change that much stuff all at one time, right?
Yeah.
So you got to be a little careful with it in that sense, but at the same time, like this is one that you're definitely going to have in the back of your head. There's no way you're going to get around it. Kind of like the 48 laws of power. Like you can't forget some of that stuff and notice how it's being used. This is the same way. So I'm sure some other people would have 50 action items, but that's too much to change at one time.
It is. It is. All right. Let's talk about style and rating. So I am a fan of John Maxwell's style. I feel like this is very approachable, and just about everyone should read this book. I don't think there's a whole lot in here to disagree with. I know that there are some specific things that maybe if you take them in isolation, they can rub you the wrong way. I know Blake had mentioned he wasn't a fan of like the leaders creating other leaders. Uh, Again, I'm giving John Maxwell the benefit of the doubt here just because I've followed him long enough and he's got enough gray hairs. But I can look past the words there and recognize that he's not, I believe, saying that because he's trying to get a whole bunch of people to follow him and a certain number of members to join his membership site. I think at this point in his life, he doesn't need any of that stuff. I think it's kind of cool that he's not even the CEO of his own organization anymore. I feel like that alone shows that he's practicing what he's preaching here. And the guy who is the CEO of his organization is the guy who's on the Maxwell Leadership Podcast. And I can't stand him on the podcast. It's kind of funny, but I can see the character and the integrity that has been reproduced in him from John Maxwell, to be honest. So like just taking this book in isolation, I would absolutely recommend that people read this. I don't even know if it's like the best John Maxwell book. I mentioned previously the 5 levels of leadership, and I remember being really impacted by that one. That one seems to have stuck with me more so than any of the specific laws that we covered in this from the first time that we read it. Well, this is second time around, so maybe it'll land a little bit different this time. However, I would just encourage people to go into this book with an open mind, willing to be challenged, willing to look in the mirror and ask, am I lacking or wanting in any of these specific areas? If you go into it looking at it like a mirror, it's going to expose some things, I feel, some shortcomings, and that's going to make you uncomfortable. For the right type of person, that is exactly why you would pick up this book. For the Bookworm audience, I think that there is value here for just about anyone. I don't think it's a 5-star book. Feels weird to say that. It's one of those books that has been around forever and is really, really famous. But I got through this one, and like I said, I still don't even think this is the best John Maxwell book that I've read. I'm thinking of the Laws of Leadership, or the 5 Levels of Leadership, but also Leader Shift was another one that I read that was really good. And I don't know. I think this is one to put in the collection. I don't know. It would be kind of fun. You got me thinking. You went through this with a group of people at your church. That would be really fun. Just tackle one at a time and talk about it. But I don't know. I guess just by the way this is put together, it's not going to go super deep in any one of these areas. And I feel like John Maxwell can do that. He has shown restraint in not doing that. However, at this point in my leadership journey, my personal development journey, I think that's kind of the thing that I would want to see more of. So that's on me. I got to follow this up with something else in these different areas. In terms of the concept of leadership, this is probably a great entry-level book. One of the first ones that you should add to your library if that's something that you're just getting into. But at this point in my life, I don't think this is a life-changing book. I think this is a good foundational book. So I'll give it 4.5 stars.
4.5 to John Maxwell. Okay. I won't tell him. I'll let you tell him.
Thank you. This is our little secret. You, me, and the rest of the internet.
Okay. Sounds good. As long as the internet doesn't tell him, we'll be okay. The thing with this one is that it's not just a here are the laws, good luck. I don't think we mentioned this, but there are action items at the end of each of these chapters. And
Yep.
I did not do any of these because I knew whenever we get books like this is going to be a ton of work, and I am not taking the time to do all of this. And that's exactly what this was, and there's a lot that you could get out of it if you do that. I think there's a lot of like self-reflection involved, and peer reflection as well. So there's a lot that you can get from this. I think there's a lot that can be learned from going through these laws. My memory of going through this with a group of men was that we did deep dive each of these topics, and people had perspectives from a wide range of places. I remember there was one guy talking about how certain things applied in a mechanic shop in the same group with a guy who was leading. He was the chief technology officer for a medical communications company, like it's a massive company, and he's the lead CTO for that company. Those two in the same group with me, and we were talking about leadership. Like it's just mind blowing the wide spectrum where these laws can be applied. So having that experience and going through this again, obviously with you, like there's a lot that you can learn from this. There's a lot of places where I want more depth. That's just the nature of this particular one, and I'm sure that where I want depth on it, you probably don't, and someone else who reads it wants it somewhere else. Like it's just the way it goes. And yet this is a 290-page book. Like it's not short. It kind of felt short to me because it seemed like it went pretty quick, but that's just the factor of John Maxwell being a good writer in this particular case. So I don't feel like it's a 5.0 book. I don't. And it's just primarily because it just seems like there's a little bit of, and there's been comments in the chat about it. Like there's a little bit of puffing up again of himself and his organizations. Like that's brought up a lot. I don't really know why that is, or why that needs to be brought up. Just what I know of John Maxwell, having followed him, is like that's not necessarily him saying, "Hey, look at me, look how great I am." That's not it. He's just using an example. I will applaud him in that most of the time it seems like whenever he brings up his own organizations, it's to show how he failed to lead them. Did you catch that? Like that was a lot of what he would bring up. And I think it's easy to discount that because he brought up his own organization talking about it. So I have to keep that in mind. So overall, I feel like this is a 4.5 book. I think you nailed it on the head with that one, Mike. So I do think people should read it, though. Like I don't know that there's somebody that shouldn't read this. And I know that this is one that like I continue to learn from it going through this again. I know I've brought out my old one in the past just to reference it. This one will take the place of that, and I know that it's one that I'm going to refer back to probably more now than I have in the past, just because I remember what all's in it now, and being in a position where I'm leading a lot more people, and this actually matters a lot more to me now. I can see how this is going to be one I'm going to take off the shelf quite a bit more than I have previously.
Yeah, I think you're correct in that it's hard to think of somebody that you wouldn't recommend to read this book. I can think of people where that recommendation would be pointless until they are in the right space or season of their life.
That's fair. That is
so
fair.
Timing is everything, right? Law of timing.
Correct. Yes. As long as your mindset is willing to grow, then yes, everybody could benefit from this. If you think you're stuck in a hole, then no.
Right. All right, let's put the 21 Irrefutable Laws of Leadership on the shelf. What's next, Joe?
Up next is a book called Ikigai. I love this. I love that I looked up how to pronounce this. But Ikigai, Ikigai. This is the Japanese secret to a long and happy life. This is by Hector Garcia and Francesc Morales? Something like that. I'm sure I'm butchering that. This is, if you remember the old Venn diagrams that we've talked about, like this is a Japanese term that we don't really have a English equivalent to. It's where you've got this four-circled Venn diagram, what you love, what the world needs, what you can be paid for, and what you are good at. The intersection of those four circles is Ikigai. That's what it refers to.
Interesting.
And there are chapters in here that are pulling out like Japanese stories and recommendations on how to have a long and happy life in that little tiny subset of those 4 circles. That's what this is about. So, should be good. It's kind of a short one, but it'll be good.
All right.
And then, what'd you pick?
After that, we are going to read How to Calm Your Mind by Chris Bailey. Friend of the show, Chris Bailey.
Okay.
I forget what episode it was. We covered the Productivity Project, I think, and we interviewed Chris.
Yep.
And he talked about how he writes all his books in TextEdit with his mechanical keyboard.
Yep.
So you should go check out that episode in the meantime. But How to Calm Your Mind is his latest book. It has just been released as we record this, and I have read the whole thing already.
Oh, cheater. Okay.
Yes. This is going to be a fun one. Chris's career trajectory, I feel, is very much in line with our own evolution of the Bookworm podcast and just our thoughts on productivity. I mean, his first book was a productivity project. It was all the experiments on himself, right? And then the next one was hyper focus, and now this one is How to Calm Your Mind. And really, it's about intentionality, disconnecting from the distractions and all of the noise. I can tell you what it is not. It is not a manual on mindfulness meditation, which is kind of what I was thinking because I know Chris, and I know that that's a big part of his story. But there's a whole big section in here on analog versus digital, and this is going to be a fun conversation.
So what you're saying is he listens to Bookworm and then he writes books about the themes that we're currently covering. Is that what we're doing?
Sure. I think more we're following him than he's following us.
Oh, okay. I got it. I got it.
Frame it that way. That's cool.
It's all in how you view the world.
Yep. Got any Gap books?
I do. It's a little bit of a weird one to mention even, but it's called Game Bird Breeder's Handbook by Alan Woodard. This is a weird one to bring up, but I've been going through a lot of it because I'm in the middle of putting together a new quail venture. I'm going to start raising quail at the house, and we've got chickens and a handful of other things. So like I wanted to put quail in the mix of that. So I've been going through this book about how to manage genetics and breeding stock and all sorts of stuff for quail because I'd love to raise quail, but that's eaten up the extra book time I've had lately. So once we get into Ikigai, I'm probably going to have a second or third one on top of that. So here we go. Yeah, that's an oddball book for you. How about you?
That is. I am finishing up a book that I think I probably mentioned previously, but I have not had a chance to finish. And I am reading right now The Culture Fix by Will Scott, who is somebody that I met at an organizational event down in Milwaukee, an entrepreneurs organization event. So he works with organizations specifically on like building solid culture, not just core value type stuff, life theme sort of a thing. He gets into like the specifics and the tactics and things like that too. But this was a book that he gave me when I met him. So I am going to finish this one.
Cool.
That's all we got for today, though. So thank you to everyone who has made it to the end. Thank you to the people who have joined the live recording. You can do that yourself by going to youtube.com/bookwormfm. Thank you specifically to the Bookworm Club Premium members who help us keep the lights on by contributing $5 a month or $50 a year. In addition to our gratitude, you do get a couple of perks when you join the Bookworm Club Premium Club. You get access to the MindNode files. I take these crazy mind map notes of all the books that we read, and then I upload those to the club in both PDF and MindNode format. So you can download those. You get access to Bookworm wallpaper, which is a 4K wallpaper, and a couple of Gap Book episodes that Joe recorded back in the day. But the big thing is that you're supporting us and you're helping us to continue to do this podcast. So we really appreciate everyone who is willing to throw a couple bucks our way to help us keep this thing going. And if you are wanting to join, you can do so at bookworm.fm/membership.
And if you're one of these amazing people who reads along with us, pick up Ikigai by Hector Garcia, and we'll cover that one with you in a couple of weeks.
Alrighty. Just under 2 hours. It's a long one.
Yeah. This is why you maybe shouldn't ask me if I want to add anything to the outline.
Okay, next time I
won't. Because I think that might have been the difference.
Sure.
It's all right. It worked out well. Thanks, Blake. I had quite a few people here today.
Everyone's off of work.
It's true. Including me. I came in today just for you.
Aw, thanks.
I was planning on not coming in today, and then I was thinking through it. I was like, wait, I got Bookworm. Wait a second. If I do this right, I could go do a couple things at work today, do Bookworm, and then tomorrow I'll just go home after lunch and get tomorrow afternoon off, which would be great because in the northern Midwest, there's what we call a snowstorm coming that's going to make it very difficult to go or do anything. So my plan is to stay home when the depths of the snow are coming tomorrow and just plow and then fix things and then plow and then fix things and then plow again.
How much snow are you supposed to get? I don't think we're supposed to get much.
Last I looked, it was around 8 inches.
What?
And
Whoa.
that's down from a foot. We were supposed to get 12 inches at one point. Right now it's showing 6 on Tuesday, but it keeps going into the night and then another 3 overnight into Wednesday. So we'll get close to a foot. They just backed off when it's happening.
Wow.
Fun, right?
Hope you survive the snowpocalypse.
Another one, right? They think, we're going to die. We had all that blizzard and snowstorm stuff that happened right before Christmas, right? And this is why, like, I don't trust these reporters and such, because they had all the stuff saying that, you know, roads are terrible, and if you pull up the 511 to see like how bad are the roads, it was like travel not advised everywhere from our place all the way into Iowa, which is where we were going to go for Christmas. And like, okay, but then I pulled up all the like traffic cams and plow cameras. I'm like, the roads are clear. Like, what are you talking about? So knowing that whenever wind kicks up, that is all out the window, right? It's like that I'm not going to follow. So I wanted to try to get out before all the blizzard stuff kicked in. So in between this snowstorm and blizzard arena, we left and went on a 5-hour car ride for Christmas. And it was fine. I was doing 5 to 10 over the whole way, like I always do. And then that night, the wind kicked up and it turned into blizzard conditions, and then they shut down the interstate, and we would not have been able to make it had we not left when we did. So I'll take it, but I'm not listening to these people when they tell me the roads are really bad. It's like, no, I'll just look up the cameras and find out if you're telling me the truth or not. Yes.
Sure.
Anyway, now that I've complained about weathermen, anything else you want to tell people before we go? Happy New Year.
Happy New Year. That's all I got.
Cool.
Thanks, everyone.
We'll see you guys in a couple weeks. Bye, all.